get to the bottom of what's truly healthy in this crazy, complex world, so you can take back what is rightfully yours. Welcome to the Health Sovereign Podcast. This is your host, Logan Christopher.
I've got some good feedback that people like that I'm doing these medical monopoly musings here on the Health Sovereign Podcast. And I've been thinking about this, reflecting on it. Why I'm doing this, why I've chosen to dig so deep into the crimes of the medical monopoly. Just came to this understanding, although I've been skirting around it for a while. Ultimately, I do not believe a person can be sovereign in their health, which is our goal here with this podcast. You cannot be sovereign in your health if you are trapped in the mindset that the medical monopoly wants you to have. That's a big, big thing. And in these two issues that I'll be reading here, we are looking at how to free yourself, the alternatives to that mindset. And this isn't to say that medicine is not great. It is great at the things it is great at. And we wouldn't find ourselves in this position if it was completely worthless. So we have to understand the right place to use it, and specifically around drugs. So here we have a whole bunch of points of how you can opt out of the system, what to do instead, and when you need to use the system, how to properly do so. It's not easy stuff. This stuff actually is fairly simple, but not necessarily easy, especially depending on where you're starting at. Anyway, let's dive in. Medical Monopoly Musings, number 42. How to avoid medicine. A number of the previous studies have established that modern medicine is one of the major threats to the world, write Peer and Shabir in a review of iatrogenesis. Therefore, strive as best as possible to avoid doctors, hospitals, and pharmaceutical medicine for the good of your health. That may sound like I'm being facetious, but I'm not. Of course these have a time and place. Get your arm ripped off, and you want the best doctors, armed with advanced technology and drugs to save you. But outside of acute trauma, their usefulness begins to fade. And for many health issues, they are worse than nothing at all. This is a generalization. Obviously, not all doctors, nor the treatments they prescribe and do, are the same. Even with diagnosis, we need to be careful. There are lots of false positives and false negatives in medicine. False positives, for example with mammography, can be horrendous because of the treatment that will surely follow. Not to mention that mammography can cause the very thing it is looking for. I would argue that even getting a yearly checkup from a doctor can be problematic. If your cholesterol is a little high and you're put on a statin because of this, you're starting the slippery slope of more doctor visits, more drugs, greater interventions, and thus greater chance of iatrogenic problems. I'm not saying to not get a checkup. I'm saying make sure you have a great doctor. Now I want to turn the issue towards more positive light. If you avoid modern medicine as much as possible, what should you do for your health? Number 1. Learn how to change your behaviors. Behavior or habit modification is necessary in order to right the ship of health. You can start small, but recognize that many changes can be made involving all the steps to come. Number 2. Learn how to clear up emotional and mental baggage. More than the physical, this is the stuff that blocks most people from having ideal health. The methods for doing so are nearly infinite. I personally like NLP and EFT. Just find something that works for you. Number 3, move well. The better you can move, in general, the healthier you are. Strength, cardio, flexibility, and mobility. And instead of working on each of these things in isolation, bring them all together for time-efficient and superior results. Number 4, breathe well. Deep breathing through the nose at a small volume and slow speed as your regular breathing pattern is ideal. Number 5, eliminate toxins as much as possible. We live in a toxic world. It's unavoidable, but you can do a whole lot to minimize toxic load. Eat organic. Get rid of the majority of skincare products. Check your water and air supply. Check your household goods. Number 6, open up your channels of detoxification. Despite all the steps above, you'll still be getting toxins. Your body alone produces them. The body can store them or it can get rid of them. By keeping your eliminations going and supporting them with fasting, herbs, and various other methods, you'll be cleaner on the inside. Number 7, support your microbiome. Realize it's not just about you, but all the bacteria, fungi, viruses, even parasites inside. Support them and they support you. Number 8, eat real food. In addition to minimizing the toxins you get from food, you want to optimize the nutrients, both macro and micro, you get from food. Almost everyone is deficient in some things. Different people can have vastly different diets and be healthy. Number 9, get hydrated. Find a quality water source and realize that a lot of hydration comes from food itself. Number 10, get into the elements. The sun is good for you in the right amount, without toxic sunscreens, please. Touching the earth is good for you. Breathing fresh air is good for you. Being outside in nature is good for you. Number 11, sleep well. Both quantity and quality is uber important. There is no way around this. Embrace it rather than fighting it. Number 12, relax body and mind. It doesn't have to be a strict meditation practice, though that is great, but everyone needs activities that relax, replenish, and restore them. Number 13, get social. Recognize that a healthy social life with family and friends is one of the most important things on this list. And hopefully the people around you can support you in all these other activities too. You are who you hang out with. Number 14, have purpose. It doesn't have to be in a career, though that is obviously great, but you must lead a purpose-driven life to be healthy. If you do all of this, you will be healthy by and large. It's not a black or white thing. Instead, think of all these things as existing on a continuum. Over time, you can continue to improve further and further. Do all this, and your need for doctors, hospitals, and modern medicine will be limited. Thus, you can best avoid one of the leading causes of death by medicine. Medical Monopoly Musings, number 43, the proper use of drugs. If we used medicines rationally, we would have much healthier populations at a fraction of the expenditure we currently have on drugs. In 2012, the top 50 companies sold $610 billion in human prescription pharmaceuticals. I have little doubt that we could easily save 95% of this, which are annual savings of $580 billion. Peter Gøtzsche. Even before reading Gøtzsche's book, I was estimating that we could do away with somewhere between 90 and 99% of drug use and would be better off for it. This is especially true if we had the same kind of money and effort dedicated to researching alternatives, such as diet, nutrients, herbs, energy medicine, etc. Western medicine is great for the things it is great at, but it's also one of the biggest money makers around, shown to be run by criminal companies and their scientific, political, and media partners. That means they push to do more and more. Thus, for your own health and that of your family, you must recognize when and how to best make use of Western medicine, and when and how to best make use of alternatives. Gøtzsche provides a useful list of what to do and not to do when interacting with the medical establishment. Withdraw your membership if your patient organization accepts industry favors. For instance, the Arthritis Foundation took over $3 million from Big Pharma. The American Diabetes Association took almost $4 million. If they do this, they're more likely to push drugs on you that may not be in your best interest, rather than proper lifestyle modification. More on these organizations in a future issue. Ask your doctor whether he or she receives money or other benefits from the industry, has shares in a company, or is visited by drug salespeople, and if so, find yourself another doctor. This one is pretty obvious, but the truth is asking this question might make it hard to find a doctor. Avoid taking drugs unless they are absolutely necessary, which they rarely are. Ask if there are other options, and whether you'll be better also without treatment. Remember that very few patients benefit from the drugs they take. Yes, oftentimes doing nothing might be the best bet, or the wide range of various other forms of treatment available. Since most diseases these days are lifestyle diseases, the treatment is changing your lifestyle, as covered last time. Ask if there are cheaper drugs than the ones your doctor suggests. Many drugs prescribed are on patent, thus being highly marked up. Compare this to generics or older drugs, which can cost less than 1/10 as much. Oftentimes, these work just as well, sometimes even better. Avoid taking new drugs the first 7 years they are on the market because, unless it is one of those very rare breakthrough drugs that offers you a documented therapeutic advantage over older drugs, most drugs that are withdrawn for safety reasons get withdrawn within the first 7 years. This was an idea I'd never heard before, but it makes sense. Unless there's a reason to be using something new, stick with the tried and true. Despite clinical safety trials, with more use comes more data, aftermarket surveys, which sometimes show that a drug is not safe, and bigger numbers were needed to see this. Remind yourself constantly that we cannot believe a word of what drug companies tell us, neither in their research nor in their marketing or information to patients. In other words, do not trust their marketing, which unfortunately includes many of the scientific studies they produce and the doctors and others they influence. Do your own research, looking at both sides. In addition, my friend Steve Young told people that the best question to start asking doctors was, what is the root cause of this issue? As almost all treatment is for symptoms only, this gets you pointed in the right direction. This requires asking uncomfortable questions. But isn't that better than the alternative of being placed on costly drugs, on worthless drugs, or at the very worst, harmful drugs? It is normal, regular, average to be on pharmaceutical medicine for the average person out there. Obviously, different countries, different stats across, but here in America, most people, I believe, are on drugs. More than one, oftentimes. Is this actually normal? My opinion is that it is our birthright to be healthy. We evolved however you imagine we got here. It's normal for us to be healthy. That's our normal state of being. We shouldn't need pharmaceutical medicine to be on something every single day in order to just keep it that way. Again, this stuff has its place. Much of it anyway, but not all of it. So how can we aim to do that? That's what I talked about in this issue here. But that's why I'm saying that to be sovereign in your health, you have to free yourself of the mindset that is propagated onto you. And that's really what it is. Where more and more we accept this as normal. We accept it as regular, that you're on several different pills just in order to handle life. This is problematic, in my view. Right now, chronic disease is a much bigger killer than infectious disease. And infectious disease is a place where Western medicine has been great. For instance, antibiotics. You have a staph infection, there's a good place and time to use drugs. Now you have an ear infection, maybe not the best time to use those. So understanding proper use of drugs there as well, because drugs tend to have short-term benefits, but may come at a longer-term cost. And that's something that is not properly understood by most people, and definitely not something that the medical establishment propagates or investigates further. Science tends to be short-term because of the cost involved in such. So I want to share a little bit about my own personal lack of drug use. I'm not saying this to brag, but to put it out there for how it may inspire people, I suppose. So I have not used any sort of medicine. I'm talking about any sort of prescription, any even over-the-counter stuff. I haven't used so much as an Advil or a Tylenol since 2012, I believe, was the last time. At that time, I had LASIK eye surgery. I believe they used some sort of topical anesthetic there. And after the surgery, I was back home. That had worn off and it was big irritation, and so I literally battled with it. It's like, okay, I'll break down and I'll take an ibuprofen. Did that, slept. When I woke up, things felt much better and didn't take anything more than that. Previous to that, I think it had been like 5 years or so since I had taken any sort of other medication, but that is the last time I have used any pharmaceutical medication. Now I'm using herbs all the time. I've been using homeopathics lately, experimenting with that. Obviously diet is my main source of medicine. So I'm definitely using stuff, and I do feel that people need medicine. It's just a type of medicine. That's where the choice lies. So our food supply, the medicine has been taken out of it because medicine is often like the bitter compounds or stuff that doesn't necessarily taste good. And in our ultra processing of food, we're stripping away the nutrients, which is medicine in its own regard. And so as our food becomes more refined, ultra processed, there's less and less there to actually keep us healthy. And then we take these pharmaceutical medicines and combine those two to try to like balance us out. That's many people. Whereas if we stick with real food and we use things like herbs, which have always been used throughout human history for every single culture around up until the modern age, that is where these medicinal compounds come from. Like that should be a part of our diet. Obviously, I'm an herbalist, I have an herbal company, so I've dove more into this material than most people have, but that is what I find, and that's one of the reasons I've gone into here. So, can people be healthy without herbs? Yeah, they can. There's a bunch of other stuff out there, but I like to look at that principle that humans have always used herbal medicine, so probably not something we should get away from doing lightly. So that's me personally. Another story, I talk about this inside of Powered by Nature. When I traveled down to the Amazon, they recommended taking Malarone, which is an anti-malarial drug. I ran into the problem, like I didn't even have a doctor to get this prescribed for me, so that was one problem, but ultimately I decided I would use anti-malarial herbs to support me on that, and the truth was, like, there barely were any mosquitoes down there, so I emerged from that unscathed. That was my choice, not saying you should do that, but yeah, I have not used drugs in a long time. Once again, there's their place for them. I had a baby 2.5 years ago, coming up on that. We were going for a natural birth. We were striving for that, but with back labor, my wife was in tremendous pain. I can only guess what that was actually like, and she decided that we were going to do a hospital transfer and use medicine in order to help her deal with that. And we still strived for the least amount of medicine, not using Pitocin, not engaging in a whole bunch of other stuff, but definitely the use of the drugs at that time was deemed necessary. And even after it, she tore a little and whatnot, so that she was on some medicine right then. And I'm not going to say, no, you can't do that or anything. Like, you don't want to get ideological about these things. But the reason I'm sharing this is to, once again, give people an understanding of how I've used medicine in my life, both Western medicine and not. And maybe this helps people to understand different ways of doing it, because so many people, because of the messaging, the marketing, the propaganda, if you will, of the medical establishment, which just bleeds into, culture. It's in TV and books and everything like this, without people stepping back and thinking about it, that they too readily reach right for a pill, even if that's something as simple as Advil, ibuprofen, which do have side effects. More people have liver failure, they have problems with digestion, there's endocrine disrupting effects because of these. So even just because they're over the counter doesn't mean that there's not side effects to these things too. I hope you have enjoyed this, and I wanted to cover a little bit more of the positive side, like what to do instead, versus just going, here's the crimes happening, here's the horrible stuff. Although that is important to look at for the reasons I've already discussed, I wanted to flip that on its head and give you really what works. And those, I believe it was 14 points, what to do for your health. Like, that is as simplified as I can make it. And obviously, each of those points could be greatly expanded in detail, but trying to keep it simple. If you do those things, like, that is 90% of health right there. That's going to keep you out of the hospital for the most part. And then when you need it, the hospital will be there. So understanding the proper use of that is absolutely crucial. If you have any questions or commentary on this issue, you can head to the blog. Had some problem with the comments earlier, but that should be working now. So leave any thoughts or questions there, and I'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. And of course, reviews definitely help grow this podcast. Share it with anyone that you'd like to. Thank you. Forget fads. How about you base your health on sound principles that have existed for millennia? That's what my book, Powered by Nature, How Nature Improves Our Health, Happiness, and Performance is all about. If you want a special deal, my company Lost Empire Herbs will give you a $30 gift card to buy a $20 book. Plus, every sale will support indigenous people in the Amazon rainforest too. Find out more and pick up your copy at poweredbynaturebbook.com.